Hey, I just want to say thank you, all 200 plus thousand of you that are subscribing to this channel. And as a gift from me to you, I made a blue jerry rig shirt just for you guys because you asked for it. So head on over to fsmgarage.com right now and get yours. Aye. It's hot. It's very hot. The pilot truck is here. Brian's dropping off my C10. This is a hell of a day.
Brian?
Never in my wildest dreams did I think this truck would be back in my life. And it's probably the nicest thing I've ever built, even though it's not done. And I have no idea what shape it's in, because I haven't seen it in nearly a decade, but there she is, home after 8 years in hibernation. This is a 67 Chevy C10, that's my son, that I built while I was at Sport Truck Magazine way back in, I don't know, this was 2007 I think, right before that magazine got shut down. My friends Brian Busby, Mike Kim and I built a tube chassis, air suspension, IRS, put an LS2 in it. This was pretty cool for its time. Then I sent it to Scott's Hot Rod in Oxnard, California, and those guys did a bunch of custom sheet metal work that you can see right here. And then the truck sat under a cover until this summer when I bought it back. It doesn't have an engine or a trans in it right now, but I'm in love with it, and I'm glad it's home. And I'm going to work on it here on Finnegan's Garage. The truth is, I don't need another vehicle in my life. I don't. But when karma and the planets align, and you run into somebody you sold a truck to 8-ish years ago that you really should never have sold, you buy that truck back. Quick like a bunny, as fast as you can. And that's what I did. This is a 1967 Chevrolet C10 short bed pickup that I bought when I worked at Sport Truck Magazine. And I bought it from a vineyard way up in Napa, California. Dragged it all the way back. It had a 327 with a 3-speed and a granny gear and a wooden bed floor. And the truck was shot. Everything was wore out. There was literally a piston broken in the engine block and it was still running. So anyway, at the time I was renting shop space from my buddy Brian Busby. He had a shop called Orange County Auto Shop, and his buddy Mike Kim worked for him. And we got together and threw away almost everything. The chassis, the interior, you name it, we just tossed it in the garbage pretty much and started from scratch. And it all began with Mike Kim's idea to use a Ford Expedition independent rear suspension in the back of this truck so we could make it handle. And you're asking yourself, Ford Expedition, why would you use that? Well, it's an 8.8-inch ring gear, limited slip differential, and it doesn't use U-joints on the output shafts, kind of like a Corvette IRS did back in the day. That was a really popular swap. This one doesn't use that, and consequently you can get a lot of travel out of it. So Mike Kim was proficient at CAD, and he designed a whole CAD file for some bitchin' bulkheads and some control arms, and when we put it all together and he TIG welded it, it resulted in a suspension that cycles about 14 inches of travel without binding and with minimal camber change. So theoretically, this thing should handle really well. I say that because I don't really know. We got the truck together, I drove it one time to a car show and one time to the office, and then got laid off when they shut down Sport Truck Magazine. And eventually I got a little desperate and sold the truck to a buddy of mine. And it disappeared. It didn't really disappear. I just, mentally when I sold it, I was really bummed out, and I just ignored the fact that it was still in the state, and I probably could have visited it, but like an ex-girlfriend, I wanted nothing to do with it. So it disappeared. And last summer, I ran into my buddy Justin, and he said, hey, I still have that thing. And I said, what'd you do with it? And he said, nothing. It sat under a car cover the entire time he owned it. And he did do a few small things to it, but for the most part, it sat there just the same way I sold it to him. And I got all fired up because I wanted it back. This is one of the nicest, most complex projects I've ever worked on. And I made him a ridiculous offer to buy it back without the engine and transmission because I couldn't afford them. And he said yes. So it just got delivered to my house. And I'm so fired up to see it again. I ripped the bed off just so I could see the back half of the truck because that is the coolest thing I've ever been a part of. So check it out. I'm hoping the airline reaches so I can show you how cool this is. My compressor is low on air. That's way past ride height. I designed the truck to ride about 7 inches off the ground, and the chassis is completely flat on the bottom of this thing. So there's nothing that's going to drag over speed bumps and whatnot. So I'll show you what it looks like all the way down again. So there's my baby in her natural state. I used to be a mini trucker back in the day. I used to build trucks that drug on the ground and ripped reflectors off the pavement and threw sparks everywhere, and I had the time of my life. And I learned a ton about building cars during my years of hacking up trucks. And it kind of culminated in this truck. This was supposed to be my ultimate truck at the time. It was going to handle well, it was going to go fast, it was going to have a trailer hitch to tow my boat, and I'm at a crossroads right now because it's 8 years later. I've kind of moved on in life. I have a truck that will tow my boat. My wife has a car that goes around corners. That's the El Camino. So I wanted this truck back really bad, and now that I have it, I'm sitting here going, well, what should I do with it? What should it be? You know, I'm 8 years wiser. Things have changed. You know, a lot of the stuff that's on this truck is slightly outdated. The wheels, the tires are dry rotted. You know, the air management system is old, probably needs to be updated. But I still think I want a truck that drags on the ground. So I'm going to keep forging ahead with this one, and you'll see that updated on Finnegan's Garage from time to time, and I'm excited. It's going to be cool. So here's all the bitchin' parts about this truck and why I think you'll be just as excited as I am to see this thing. So if you've ever thought about swapping an IRS into the back end of your pickup, here's a few things you should know. There's a couple different variations out there. You've got the classic Jaguar rear end that a lot of street rodders used in the 80s and early 90s. You've got the RX-7 rear end that a lot of mini truckers used into the 90s. Corvette rear ends, which have limitations. This is out of a Ford Expedition, and it's got a few things going for it. Number one is it will cycle a lot of travel if you dump the control arms that come with it and build your own. Number two is it comes with factory disc brakes that I think are, and this is 8 years ago, I think they're about 12 inches in diameter. They're pretty big. And then it's got an aluminum mount in the back. It's a limited slip rear end, which is awesome. Just in general, you can get them from junkyards pretty cheap, and it's a pretty good swap. Now, this one is pretty custom. You're probably never going to see a swap like this ever done again because it's very labor intensive, very time consuming. The front and rear control arm mounts and diff mount are made out of lightweight sheet metal that's been laser cut, drilled, and dimple dyed, and then all TIG welded together. And it's very reminiscent of what you'd see in a Baja truck, off-road style, and that's because at the time, my buddies and I, we were all into off-road racing, and my buddy Mike Kim was super into it, and he was a really talented, and still is, TIG welder. And so he TIG welded these bulkheads together, and the arms. And then it's gusseted from here to here with tubing. The frame rail is all 2x4. It used to be really clean. It's covered in dust right now. But we actually painted the whole frame. It looked pretty good when we first finished it. It's got a MagnaFlow stainless steel exhaust. The greatest benefit of doing IRS is that the drive shaft never moves. And so what that results in is you don't have to cut the floor of the truck to go this low. You'll see it's just notched right here. just enough for the drive shaft to clear. And this lays rocker without raising the floor of the truck up. And also, the bed floor is only raised about an inch above stock. So you end up with a whole lot of usable bed space and a lot more legroom in the cab if you go IRS, which is why I did it. The only downside, and it's pronounced here on this truck because I blew it on the back spacing when I ordered these wheels, is you'll notice that where you set the truck up for ride height, when I go really high or really low, the wheels look like they're sucked in the wheel wells a little bit. And eventually I'll change these wheels and I'll get ones with the right offset. It won't look that bad. But anything with extreme travel in IRS is going to result in a wheel that travels in an arc like this, kind of like a front suspension. And that can make the truck look weird all the way up or all the way down, but right in the middle when you're cruising it looks right, as far as I'm concerned. Okay, so I wanted air suspension on this truck. One, for the adjustability, and two, because it'll ride good. The Fox remote reservoir shocks are completely unnecessary. That's just showing off at that point. The remote reservoir is there to keep the fluid cool inside of it when the shock is working really quickly when you're going off-roading or even road racing. But in a truck that drives around on the street, this is, totally not necessary. One thing I see here that I never noticed before when I first built the truck is how close the air spring is to the shock. Now, I've cycled the rear end up and down and I've not actually seen it touch, but it's close, man. That's like 10 sheets of paper between those things, so I might have to move the bag mount a little bit. But other than that, what else you see back here is an aluminum fuel cell. I believe back in the day I got this from Brothers Trucks. Really well-made unit. I think off the top of my head it'll support 500 horsepower with the electric fuel pump that's in it. That's not going to be enough because I've decided that the truck needs more power. It has no power now. There's not even an engine or a trans in here, and I'm already sitting here going, we need more horsepower. And if you're wondering how much horsepower an IRS will take, I don't know, but I did have the axle shafts upgraded to 300M material. And at the time, the guys that built them told me you could stick 600 horsepower through this and it wouldn't blow up. Now, is that 600 horsepower at the drag strip and you blow it and it actually dead hooks and pulls a wheelie? Or 600 horsepower with the tires spinning? Obviously, those are two wildly different things. I don't know the answer, but we'll find out at some point because I think a truck like this deserves 600 horsepower, if not more. I actually never envisioned this truck missing its door handles, even though every truck I owned before that we shaved the handles on. And this is one of the metal mods that Scott's Hot Rods did when they had the truck up in Oxnard. They got rid of the peak on the back of the cab, they shaved the handles, the cowl, they made some really nice inner fender wells inside the engine compartment. And so yeah, now that these are gone, I'm going to have to put some electric solenoids in here to open the door. But for now, I'm going to show you the other reason why IRS is cool. That is an almost completely stock floor in the C10. You'll see a 1-inch raised section right in the middle where the drive shaft goes through. And a bitchin' transmission tunnel cover. This is set up for a 6-speed manual Tremec gearbox and an LS engine. But you C10 guys, if you've ever driven one that's been traditionally body dropped, you'll know there's a lot more room in this truck than a traditional body drop would offer. And there's more than a stock truck offers because we replaced the firewall and added 4 inches of legroom going forward where your feet go. So if you've got long legs like me, you would love a truck like this. So let's take a look under the hood. This is a stock hood that I think has Porter-built hinges holding it up. And I didn't install these, Scott's Hot Rods did, so I'm not real familiar with them. But there's either something not adjusted right or this is the length of the travel. Either way, the hood doesn't open nearly enough for somebody as tall as me. But if you come in here, and hopefully the camera adjusts for the darkness, you'll see a fully shaved firewall. Scott's replaced the entire firewall on the truck, and then they built these awesome inner fender wells that match the shape of the control arms. and that bolt in place so they're removable. And this truck, I drove it. The radiator's here, the exhaust is here, I got the headers back, the wiring's gone, but what I've got to do now is find an engine and a trans, wire it, plumb it, and I could go cruising, you know, without even painting it. If I do paint this truck, I think I'm going back with the stock blue-green metallic paint because I really like it and you don't usually see it. So I'm stoked. I don't know how quickly I'll get this together, but I'm anxious to drive it down the street. If you've ever hung around C10s or you've owned one yourself, then you'll notice that is not a stock bed floor. In fact, this truck came with a wood bed floor that was completely rotten. And when I finished working on the truck, there was no bed floor. There was just some mounting tabs, and it sat over the chassis, and it looked awesome because you could see all the work that was done in the back end of the truck. And Scott's built this, and it's fantastic. It's the only thing worth cutting and installing to hide all that work that was done to the chassis is something like this. And one of the cool details that I like about it is the body line through the wheel tub is carried on inside the walls of the bed. And then there's also 2 trap doors there for compartments. One will ultimately be where the battery goes, and the other one I think will be for smuggling beverages into car shows. These wings right here, those actually match the contour of the control arms when the truck's laid out on the ground. And then that hole there is an inspection cover for getting to the rear end and the rear shock reservoirs for charging them with nitrogen and that sort of thing. I might fill that hole in. I don't know. It's fairly useless. The other thing I might do is make a tilt bed for this so that you could still see all the awesome sheet metal work but appreciate all the cool suspension work that's back there also. I'm thinking make the bed tilt backwards. That might be kind of cool. And I've never done it before, and it's my favorite thing is to do things I've never done before. So if you have any tips for making a tilt bed on a truck this low to the ground, I'd love to hear them. The last thing I'm going to show you is what this truck looks like at ride height. And I'm going to ballpark it because I can't see when I'm lifting it. But I set it up to drive at 7 inches off the ground, which is actually pretty high, but still tucking a whole bunch of those 22-inch voids. Yeah, that's about how high she needs to be. And this is a good indication of how badly I blew it on the back spacing for the wheels. If you look, I can put my whole fist in there between the tire and the fender, so these ones are wrong. Those ones aren't so bad, but these ones are wrong. And I don't remember what it's supposed to be, but we'll do some measuring later on and figure out, can I put a wider wheel, more tire? I don't know. We'll find out, on a future episode of Finnegan's Garage.